Hello, I'm Kat Murphy of Artful Efforts. Welcome to my channel. Today I have a wonderful guest, Mason Taylor, up and coming filmmaker. We talk about his first short film, the short film he's working on currently, how he goes about characterization and creating such authentic, tender characters and relationships, and what is inspiring him. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get right into it.
Mason, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm wondering if you can just give our viewers and readers a little introduction to yourself and what you do.
Yeah, okay. My name is Mason. I'm an actor, a writer, filmmaker, just because we're a small crew, so we kind of all do a little bit of everything. But yeah, that's us. That's me. So
I was gonna say, what's us?
yeah, so I mean, I write by myself, but I'm actually lucky enough to have somebody else from school who is also a filmmaker, and so we kind of been just working together since then. And so every time I have a project, I already know one person who's going to be a part of it.
Beautiful. Love a good
Yeah.
collaborative partnership.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, filmmaking is a team sport, so, makes it work.
Absolutely. Awesome. So when we were talking about this interview, I was very interested in your kind of general theme. So I'm just going to dive right into it. And I'm going to read the first question because I wrote it much better than I could ever say it on the fly.
I know how that goes.
Yeah. So I watched Peanut Butter and Jazz, your short film, and what struck me most was the tenderness and earnestness in the new relationship as they get to know each other. From my experience, film doesn't often take this kind of realistic, nuanced approach to relationships. And
Yeah.
from what you told me about your work in progress, it seems to be focused around similar themes. I know this time it's a relationship that's they've been together, so it's not the meeting,
Right.
but it still seems to focus on kind of that nuanced, realistic relationship. So I'm first just curious what drew you to this subject matter and continues to draw you to it.
Yeah. So overall, like with these films and then going forward, I kind of just want to tell stories that explore like the depth of humanity that Black people have and just other people of color. So to do that, I want to tell stories that have like authentic characters, not just caricatures, but just real people.
Yeah, I definitely felt that with Peanut Butter and Jazz, especially. I feel like a lot of times, not all the time, but I've definitely seen some films by men where the female characters are very much seem to be wish fulfillment to them
Yeah.
rather than whole people. So
Yeah.
um,
That's
I,
that's a
I
popular way to go.
yeah. So how did you approach the characterization in PD and Jazz, and does this process differ from how you're approaching it in your new project?
Yeah, so it's kind of the same. They didn't come from the same place, but it's really just based off of either real situations that I've been in, uh, situations that my friends have been in, or situations that I've seen. And so I start there as the base, and then I'll build off of that with like what ifs, or just kind of thinking about if it didn't go right, what could have made it go right, or if it did go right, what it could have made it go wrong. So just playing with just real situations, and it's never like based off of one person or one exact situation, but that's kind of where it starts.
Cool. And I don't know if you saw, but I recently published an interview with Seth Sherwood, who's a screenwriter, and we were talking about how much the actors play a role in the characterization. So I'm
Oh
curious,
yeah.
is that your experience too?
Yeah, and for me, I love dialogue. Some people don't love dialogue. They would rather have just a lot of action and stuff, which is cool. I like that too. But with these stories, the dialogue is really important. And so the actor or actress that takes on the role has to kind of be able to add their own uh, just like little flavor on it, just to bring out the things that aren't necessarily in all the dialogue. So they definitely, I mean, with Peanut Butter and Jazz, we spent probably like 3 or 4 months building those characters. And then with my most recent project, because of quarantine, we got to take a lot longer, which was actually, it was beautiful. Like it was such a good thing that we had so much time. So yeah, the actors and actresses absolutely have a huge part in that.
I'm curious what that process looks like because you said it takes a few months. So what are you
Yeah.
doing over those months together to kind of get that?
Yeah. So we'll do table reads, which is that's pretty standard, but then we'll also go into like scene analysis, character study type of stuff, and really ask like why is this character making this decision? Um what about them would lead them to do this or say this, or how would they say it? What's the tone, the context, the layers above? So like the script and the dialogue is kind of like a base, but then with the actors and stuff, we can build on that. And then that just helps us on camera too, because it's like, I'm not like, I have a reason to say this line this way in this pace, that kind of stuff.
I love that. That's definitely, I love when so I have a performance background, mainly in dance, and I love when
Oh,
choreographers
okay.
are like, let's break down each movement. What does this mean to you? Why are you doing
Yeah.
this? And then for me, when I'm
Yeah.
performing, it helps me because I'm not just thinking about steps or like in an actor's instance lines.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about like my
Hmm.
journey as this creature or character or whatever.
Exactly. And because my work is so character driven, that's kind of, that's the key. That kind of makes or breaks it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I found just off topic a little, I guess not off topic, but diverting from the questions, I did
yeah,
really like I found your characters very endearing and I really
thank
appreciated,
you.
um, especially the woman, what was the character's name in PBS?
Terza.
Terza, yes.
Yeah.
I love how she was just so real.
Yeah.
Um,
She was just herself.
yeah, like not playing, like she wasn't especially feminine or not feminine or anything. It
Hmm.
was very like just existing in this authentic world that I really appreciated.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, so as I kind of mentioned, I think this kind of theme is especially rare with male creators, as I mentioned
Yeah.
before. So, was this, I'm curious for you when you're working on these characters, is this like a conscious break from traditional masculinity, or is this just kind of expressing your personal experience with relationships and staying authentic to your personal journey, or are you kind of consciously making this larger break from the norm?
It's funny. So when I read that question, I had never thought about it that way. Like I don't, it's not necessarily an intentional break or anything like that. For me, um, it's kind of just goes back to exploring the humanity of these characters in a way that I don't see happen too much, especially with characters that look like me. So in that way, it is intentional that I really want to show another aspect of just what it's like to be a person, uh, that I don't see too much.
Why is that important to you?
I mean, everybody wants to see themselves reflected, you know? And so when you see, like for instance, I don't know if you've seen any of the Before trilogy, by Richard Linklater. So they're those movies are like 100% dialogue. It's two people, two of them. It's mostly just two people, and so anyway, I love those movies, but neither of them look like me, and so I'm like, how can I see myself? I love those movies, but I want to be able to see, like, physically see myself. Even though when you're watching a movie, and like, I mean, I could see myself sometimes in, characters that are women, but obviously I'm not a woman, so I can't, like, it's not a direct thing. But yeah, I just want to be able to kind of translate that to screen so that people can see another side. Like, there's not just one way to be. There's like a whole. I mean, everybody's so different. So uh, seeing characters that are always the same, talk the same, look the same, or from the same places or whatever. Um, I just want to break that.
I love what you just said too about like being able to relate to characters that are women as well. I think like for me, good art, especially when it's a story with literal characters, comes from talking from these places of kind of like a universal truth where
Mhm.
everyone can relate to it and being able to see ourselves in these other characters. And I agree that, diverse and varied representation is important, but I think also just as a viewer and as an artist, being able to look at these characters and being able to relate to their story, even if they aren't necessarily like you at all, is
Of
really
course.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Totally. And then the other thing I really like more particularly, and I know I've talked about this more in my questions that I'm actually kind of hitting on it right now, but it's just like I'm not even sure if it's that the characters are tender or if it's kind of what we were talking about. Your process is very tender to the characters, but there's this kind
Right.
of tenderness that reads for me in your work when it comes to the characters. So I was just kind of curious where that comes from, if you do think it is just the process of like taking all this time with your characterization, or if it's something else in your approach. But I don't know if you feel that tenderness or relate to that word at all with your work,
Yeah.
but I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I think that like it just comes from a place of wanting these characters to feel real. I don't want, let me see how I can say this. I like blockbuster feely movies sometimes, but I also like movies where the characters are just real. And some people might say that they're dry, but they're just real people, you know. And so I like that, and I want to um, add aspects of that into my work. Um, yeah. So I think that's where it comes from. I think that there isn't always like you said with the character specifically is not where the tenderness is, but just in overall, I could definitely that would relate to the work for sure.
I'm just curious too, I didn't write this down, but it seems like you are you said you like dialogue. I'm totally a dialogue film person too.
Yeah,
I love some good dialogue. I'll take that over action
yeah,
any day of the week. But I'm curious if you kind of extend that tenderness into the other aspects of filmmaking and how you use kind of the tone and the visual components to help create this kind of richer, nuanced, authentic world for your characters to live
yeah. I would say yes. So the project that we just worked on, I was talking to my DP, and we worked with her for almost as long as we worked with the other actresses. And I really was like, I don't know if this makes sense, but I want to be able to add a texture, like I want people to be able to feel it, like with their like it's tangible, what the characters are feeling, what they're saying, what they're kind of going. I want them to be there, and I want to translate that to the screen, in a way that doesn't make it look not grainy, but just texture. And she got it. I don't know how she got it, because I didn't know if I was saying it the right way, but she got it. And so yeah.
so just working closely with your collaborators to kind of make sure everyone's on that page.
Yeah, just making sure that everybody has that same like level of care for it. And again, yeah, not even necessarily about the characters, but just overall the whole project. And isn't just there like, oh yeah, I like to mess with lights, so it's cool, but like actually cares about the project.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a like, oh, we're gonna make this a really like fashion, like,
Yeah.
striking. It's like very real. Like you are at the park witnessing this. And it just kind of struck me. You have this third character in PD and Jazz that's this older woman who's kind of observing this
Hmm.
couple start to form. I'm just now kind of like curious, is she kind of a stand-in for the audience? Was that an intentional move to kind of show the voyeuristic almost aspect of the film and watching this couple get to know each other? Or what was the thought of with this third character? Like what role was she playing in the main character's life?
She is kind of she's a little bit of comedic relief. She's a little bit of like a voice of reason from the other side, like kind of neutral voice of reason. So not necessarily favoring either of them, but just somebody that can see something that they don't see from where they are. I definitely think that she can, act as like a stand-in for the audience, because she is seeing from their perspective. But her role is really short. So yeah, she was more just like a a break in from just what they were on. Because had she not been there, I'm not sure I would have ended it the same way.
How do you think it would have ended?
I don't know. So Terza was thinking about leaving, right? And so I think she might have. I think that they might have just took it for what it was in that moment and just kind of went their separate ways. And not in a bad way, but just kind of, this is what I'm doing right now, so I'm just gonna keep doing that.
And what do you hope audiences take away from your films and these relationships and these characters that you're building?
Maybe just an intro to a different perspective, or at the least like the start of a conversation. I hopefully with everything that I do starts a conversation. That's like one of the biggest things I want, is just to, start a conversation from a different way that maybe, oh, I didn't think about it this way, or I never could see that before. And now like it's different.
And what's the conversation with PB and Jazz that you're hoping people carry on?
Yeah.
Do they see it?
So it could be, like I was saying, whether you take advantage of that moment or you don't, and let it be what it is. Either way, I don't think that either one is right or wrong. I just think that, like, yeah, person to person, it could be good, it could be bad, but taking something away from every situation for sure. Learning something. I mean,
what I'm getting, like my takeaway from what you're saying and having seen PB and Jazz, that I'm really liking is kind of, definitely nuance is a word that keeps coming up for me when I think about your work. And I love that what you're saying is basically that, or what I'm hearing anyways, you say, is that you're hoping that people take away that situations have nuance and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. And it's like kind of respecting that nuance in a way, and respecting that certain times in life or certain people will see situations and people differently, and that's okay, which is kind of
I definitely, I mean, being like in my 20s, it's like, certain people think that like it's supposed, like I should have it figured out, or then there's the opposite, like, no, you shouldn't have it figured out. So it's kind of just approaching it like, I don't know, like I have to figure out what works for me. And so having characters that have to figure out what works for them outside of what anybody else might say is the way that it should go, that's important to me.
I'm curious, I didn't write this one down either, but so for your new project, which I haven't heard much of, I just heard like this little pitch basically where you said it's about this married couple that are kind of going through a rocky situation trying to figure it out, and so it seems like PB and Jazz is maybe something you relate to more specifically. They're like two young people just meeting. That's something like we've all felt and been in that situation for the most part. So this next one is kind of something that's maybe, I'm assuming, not as familiar to you. Has your approach changed with that at all, or?
So it's interesting because they're not married. They've known each other for their whole lives, right? Basically their whole lives. And they started dating like 5 years ago. So they've been together for a minute. And it's funny because one of the notes I got on the script before we actually went into production was, why aren't they living together? And I was like, I mean, I did that on purpose just because I didn't want that for these characters. Not to say that it's right or wrong, but I just didn't. I didn't want that for them. So I think that, that was more so kind of exploring that thought of like, well, this, like, they've been together for so long, so they should be married and they should be living together. You know what I mean? Like, so I wanted to do something different, and I think that the approach was a little bit different just because. In Peanut Butter and Jazz, they didn't know each other. So there is a little bit or a lot of like awkwardness between them at first. Whereas with this one, they're too comfortable. They're totally comfortable.
Yeah, I bet there's a big difference too, because in Peanut Butter and Jazz, it's kind of like we as the audience are at the same place that they're at. Like we get to see them meet for the first time, and we're meeting them for the first time, and we're seeing them interact for the first time for themselves and for us. And so I would imagine for this new project, it's a much different perspective because we're kind of jumping in years later. So I'm curious too, like how how does the characterization process differ when these characters know each other better than maybe even you know these characters,
Yeah.
or definitely than
Yeah.
we do as an audience?
It was interesting. I mean, there's not that there wasn't world building for Peanut Butter and Jazz, because there absolutely was, but I think that for Follow My Lead, building out those characters and building out their world was a lot, because there's a lot there. So I mean, even thinking about somebody that you've been even just a friend for like 10 years or something like that, like there's a lot that happens in that amount of time, and there's a lot that good and bad that's built into that relationship. So exploring that was, I mean, it was a lot of fun, but it was definitely work too, because sometimes it's like, does that really fit with their personality? Like, would they say that? Would they react that way? I don't know. So yeah, I guess so. Like, as an actor, that's another thing that I kind of, with the other actress, I was like, yeah, feel free to like take control in that way. Like, you can, if you think that she would say that this way or wouldn't say that, like I'm good with you, just running with it. So there was a lot of that, a lot of I think that she would do this or she would hold back here, or just kind of playing on that, and then why. And so yeah, there was a lot of building the layers that aren't necessarily, like, I think that I hope that people will see it, but it's not something that you actually would pull out and notice. It's just like, oh, like these are people that know each other, even though we don't.
Right. Yeah, because in PB and Jazz, it's like, when we're all meeting someone new, you're really focused on kind of like interpreting things, uh,
Yeah,
and as an audience too, we're like interpreting things. And I've been in a relationship for like 5 years, so I can say from my experience, now how I feel about my relationship is I assume that I already know
yeah.
what he's thinking or feeling or meaning in a given
Mhm.
situation, which is not necessarily true. But I just think that's interesting. It's like two totally different dynamics between being very kind of like,
Yeah,
ooh, what are they thinking? And now it's like, I know what you're thinking, in my
right. Like, I
relationship.
already know.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Has your personal perspective, and how you kind of go through your relationships, has that been affected by your work since you've been kind of diving into these authentic nuanced relationships in various stages? So when you are, whether it's a friendship or romantic or whatever, do you feel like your work has affected you personally and how you approach relationships?
I think that my art has changed a little bit, just because I think that, like, hopefully, I'm learning from every situation, friendship, relationship, whatever, and growing with that. So I would say that, yeah, my perspective flexes with that. I think that it's, yeah, both, like my what I think I know and then what I actually don't know, and learning new things through people, through situations or whatever. That definitely has changed. But I also think that, yeah, my art has gotten better through that too.
So what are the big shifts between PV and Jazz and Follow My Lead? Is that what you said it's
Yeah,
called?
yeah, it's gonna follow my lead. Um,
Just as an artist, like as the person making the work, not necessarily
yeah,
the work itself, but
yeah. So I actually, it's funny because we've wrapped production on Peanut Butter and Jazz, and then I started working on Follow My Lead not too long after it. So me personally, I don't know. I already kind of had the realizations that I tried to write out through Follow My Lead in the back of my mind. Like, they were already stuff that I had learned last year. So it wasn't in the process of making those two. It just kind of, like, the timeline for me, like personally outside of my work, was ahead of the work, but then it kind of caught up. So
and how does it change? Do you think between that and like, so I've seen PB and Jazz. I haven't seen Follow My Lead. What are the new things that I'm going to see in Follow My Lead that I didn't
yeah.
see in PB and Jazz?
Um,
I'm throwing this at you. I
so
didn't write this down, so take your time and
it's no, it's
think about
good.
it for a minute.
Yeah, it's good. The characters, having known each other for so long, sometimes I feel like long-term relationships are like you're there because it's comfortable, and even if it like it might not be the right thing, but it's just like this is what we've been doing, so let's keep doing this. So they have to kind of navigate what it means to choose each other every day, or even if they want to anymore. Uh, so I think that with Peanut Butter and Jazz, the choice was like, am I gonna kind of go away from like my work life and everything like that that I have going on, and spend time with you. Whereas with Follow My Lead, there's not really any outside things that are making their relationship go left or right. It's really, it's them. Like it's, because day to day, it's like things change, people change, you change, like, it's different. And so they have to really acknowledge that and figure out what, like who they are now, not who they were when they met each other. So there's a lot more layers to it. There's a lot more you can just see the characters more. I think with Peanut Butter and Jazz, the characters were good, but I think that with Follow My Lead, I was able to get a little bit deeper into like who they are now, and to kind of bring that out.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited to put it out.
Do you see yourself continuing to explore these kinds of relationships and stuff in your work after Follow My Lead, or are you thinking about taking a new direction? Or
I am actually like, I'm a sucker for rom-coms sometimes. Not all the time. They're not my favorite, but I do like a good one. So I think that for me, I think it'd be cool to explore those a little bit more. Maybe even straight on like how like you would expect a rom-com to be, but that, or even more so reality drama based, like Follow My Lead, where it's not a rom-com. It's just real. And so I think so. I think for me, that's like the most direct way that I can explore characters and just show humanity of the characters when it's dealing in a situation like that, because most people can relate to a relationship regardless of how long it is. Most people can relate to that. So
yeah, I was gonna say it's a great topic because it's like one of the most important parts of being human is like relationships, romantic
yeah,
or not.
yeah,
But also I feel like as humans, we're always learning about how we relate to other people, even like what you said with Follow My Lead, where even in a long-term relationship where you've known each other forever, you're still constantly learning how to relate to that
mhm.
person. So it's definitely a topic that you can exhaust your entire life and never
Oh
never know
man,
everything about it.
exactly.
Okay, cool. So when you're starting on a new film or script, what inspires the story? Like I like PB and Jazz, I kind of assume, and I could be totally wrong, that you met someone and that's what inspired that story. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious. What gets
It's
you going with these?
Yeah. So I actually I've been with my girlfriend for 3 years, so we didn't just meet. But that does kind of pull from instances when I have just met somebody. So that's kind of where that came from. But for me, my notes app is stacked with ideas. Like I write different concepts wherever I am. If I see something, if I'm having a conversation, if I'm with a friend or with my girlfriend or my family or whatever, just out in the world, I'll write down concepts and I think like, oh, that might be cool to dig deeper into. And it isn't always, but yeah, that's kind of where they come from. I mean, I I have notes that I haven't looked back on yet that hopefully soon or sometime I can look back and maybe pull something from. But yeah, it usually starts from just like a true to life space. So yeah, it's funny. Like I've heard people say like, if you're gonna be around an artist, you're gonna be a muse at some point. So that's definitely true with me. It's they start from a very like just something that was real and then go somewhere else.
That's such a good practice. I try to do that and I'm so like up and down with being good about it. So kudos. Good for you.
I'm not good about it. I'm not good about it all the time. And like I said, I have notes that I haven't looked back on. So it's
Yeah.
usually just the most recent ones that I'll get to. But yeah.
And so do you think with those notes, is it the ones where you kind of like, they really stick in your mind? Like maybe the ones where you don't even have to look back on it, it just sticks out to you. Are those the things that kind of make it into a work? Or is it really just like going back and then kind of finding themes among the notes? Or how, like what, how do you decide of all those notes, what's going to make it into something, or what are you going to, like, I'm going to explore this more? How do you decide
Yeah.
that?
So far, it's been the ones that stick in my mind. I mean, the ones that are like I write them down so I don't forget them, but then usually the ones that like I'm not gonna forget stay in my mind even after I wrote it. So I go back to those. The person I was talking about that I work with a lot, I'll tell him ideas sometimes, and so like it'll be like fresh in the chat. So then when I open it, I'm like, oh yeah, and then I'll start working on it like that. So yeah, I wish I was better at scrolling back at old ones. I have one time I have scrolled back and looked at an old note and wrote something. It hasn't we haven't shot it or even thought about shooting it, but it's written, so it's happened once.
I'm sure too, having the part that having your collaborative partner too, sometimes when you might throw an idea at him, and if he's also excited about it, that might kind of fuel the idea to be taken further, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so he's way more like comedy, like that's his thing, and so I'm more drama. So we don't write together just because he would always want to add like some more jokes. I'm like, nah, bro, this isn't the time for that. But after we write, then that's when we kind of can collaborate more. Just because then it's like, oh yeah, I see what you were trying to do there without me trying to make something more serious or him trying to make something more funny. So, but
So
it's
if you ever
yeah.
do a rom-com, then maybe you'll write together.
Oh yeah, no, that's like yeah, that would be perfect.
Are there any artists? I know you mentioned that trilogy, and I want to grab that link from you so I can share that.
Yeah.
Are there any other artists that you look up to in their approach to relationships, or kind of with the similar themes that you're working with, that we should look into?
I really am inspired by film, but also music. So for me, music wise, I would say Andre 3000, Marvin Gaye, and Childish Gambino. And then film wise, the person that I look up to the most is Spike Lee. Not necessarily content wise, but just the way that he goes about filmmaking. That's kind of the path that I'm trying to stick to. Barry Jenkins, for content, absolutely. Like the way he writes is just yeah, he's on another level. So, and then Richard Linklater, who did the Before trilogy. So,
Any advice for filmmakers or creators producing their own shorts? It could be about like characterization in the themes and relationships, or just anything that you're like, artists need to know this.
I think that like when you're first starting out, you have like a lot of questions, and so you like wait for people to either answer you or try to steer you some way. I think that and this isn't my advice. This is advice that I got, but it was the best advice, and it was just to tell the stories that you want to see, regardless of like what people say is working or isn't going to work or whatever. Just like if you want to tell a story, go ahead and do it. And don't wait for somebody to green light it or anything like that. Like if you can make it happen and make it happen well, just tell it. I mean, yeah, don't wait because yeah, you're not always going to have the opportunity. So if you do, you should run with it.
Well, and you're a perfect example of that when you were talking about like this really trusted collaborative partner that you have, that you know, that you've known for a long time. Even he doesn't understand your vision when you're throwing
Yeah,
an idea. So of
right.
course, like no one can see how you are seeing your work before
Exactly.
you make it. So you have to make it
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. And sometimes that's the toughest part. So
And for artists struggling with that, any words of encouragement for them?
I think you have to trust yourself. Yeah, you just have to trust that uh, that people want to hear from what you have to say. That people want to um, check out your work, even if like it doesn't like nobody knows who I am, but like you have to trust yourself and say like this is good. Like people need to see this, hear this, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be a lot of work, but if you actually love it, it'll be worth it.
I think too, just to jump off that a little bit, I'm not sure, I think it's been said a couple different ways, but just the idea too of like what the world might need to hear from you. You might not be able to get there until you've done your earlier work to understand
Yeah,
yourself and your process. So even if it's like, you know, the early work isn't the best, or, you know, my early film work is just kind of really silly, but
yeah,
I needed to do it to be able to make better stuff later.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing about advice too, is like it's all from like personal experience. So it might work perfect for you, but it also might not. So you just have to try and find out what works for you and what doesn't. So
No other way to figure it out.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So my last question is just, where is the best place to follow you? We're obviously going to be looking out for Follow My Lead soon.
Yeah.
I think you said Twitter was the best place, but I'll let you kind of
Yes.
tell us where to keep tabs on you.
Yeah. So Twitter, yeah, that's the best place. It's Mace Writes. Um, and then yeah, I that's the best place. So
And then you have Instagram too. I'll share your Instagram.
I
And
do. Yeah.
do you have a website as well?
No, not right now. It's funny. So hopefully in November, somebody has had my domain since before I was alive. So but they don't even use it. But it's
Okay.
expiring in November, and so hopefully I can get it. And yeah, just because I want it to be my name. So
Cool. Well, when you get your domain, we'll plug your domain in there too. So send it my way.
yeah, that'll be cool.
And thank you so much for sharing about your work and characterization and advice.
Yeah,
I look forward to
yeah. Thanks for asking me.